This lecture is going to talk about print media buying. So print media has been around for a long time, way before broadcast. And when we talk about print, we used to talk about magazines and newspapers. Now, unless you're my age, 53 or older, newspapers are probably something of the past for you. Newspapers have been in a long decline for a long period of time because most of us are now consuming our daily news on our phone via some app, through a link to CNN or something else. So newspapers have really been struggling to gain a foothold and stay relevant in the realm of media choices out there. But print historically has been talking about newspapers, which are oftentimes daily, and magazines, which are oftentimes weekly or monthly, what we call a periodical. So I'm going to talk solely about magazines because newspapers probably won't be around for much longer. So magazines, if you were to call a magazine Sports Illustrated and you want to be in their upcoming issue, the swimsuit edition issue, they have long lead times, which means you're going to need to place your ad several months before that magazine actually is printed and gets distributed. And the reason for the long lead times is because magazines are expensive to print and they tend to be printed on these large web presses. And they're in certain parts of the US, like Chicago. And so they have to get all this thing put together and then shipped off to be printed. So it used to be they actually set typeface and had these big machines. Now that's all done digitally, but they still tend to work several months in advance. It varies by the magazine, but if you called them 2 weeks before you wanted to run your ad, you would not be able to run your ad. So they have long lead times. You need to work several months out in getting your creative to magazines. When would you run a print campaign? So when you think about somebody who's looking at an advertisement in a magazine, they are oftentimes a subscriber to that magazine. That means you have a high quality prospect there that has paid to receive that magazine, which means they're probably going to read that magazine. And if they're reading that magazine, they're probably going to look at the ads that are in that magazine. And if they subscribe to a magazine, you already know something about them as far as a target audience because they might be subscribing to a magazine that represents something that they're interested in, what we call AIOs, activities, interests, or opinions. For example, I've had a subscription to Surfer magazine for many years, and I don't anymore, but when I did, it's because I like to read the articles and I love to surf, and so most of the ads in there are obviously going to be targeted towards somebody who likes to surf or likes to buy surf products and apparel, right? So magazines are pretty targeted, and you have a pretty high quality prospect. They can be very expensive. They're not as expensive as broadcast, but they can still be quite expensive. Now, with broadcast, we talked about rating points, and I also mentioned that you're probably going to use a media buyer to place broadcast advertising because it's highly negotiated, and you need the skills and expertise of a media buyer to kind of do that. With print, however, print is something that you can buy on your own. So the way print is typically purchased is you contact the print publication, and they're going to send you a media kit. Back in my day, you actually had to call them, and they would mail it to you, and then they would hound you to see if you wanted to run some ads. Nowadays, you can just go online to the magazine's website, and you can access their online media kit right there online directly, which saves you getting harassed by a salesperson. And a media kit basically tells you a lot of things. It tells you here's how many subscribers we have, and if they have any zoned editions. Magazines used to just be a national thing that all you could buy is the magazine and get everybody that subscribes to the magazine nationally. But they've now fragmented into more zoned editions. You could buy maybe the West Coast or the Midwest or the East Coast. They're not so targeted that you can buy specific zip codes because they just can't physically distribute that many different versions of the magazine and have that kind of distribution network with different advertisers for this zip code versus that zip code. It's too complicated and too expensive for them to try to ship that many different versions. But they have gotten more targeted, and they tend to have several different versions, but they're going to be multiple states or regions versus individual cities or zip codes. The magazine reader is spending a lot of time reading that magazine. So print advertisements are for products when you want to educate the consumer and you're giving them a fair amount of information. Again, a lot of this is now migrated online. So whereas newspapers are dying, surprisingly, magazines are still doing okay because they have that targeted audience. But magazines are also struggling, staying relevant, given the rise of blogs and uber-targeted websites and all the social media websites that they're having to compete with all these other sources where people can get stuff that's specific to their activities and interests. But magazine subscribers are spending a lot of time reading the magazine, and you can run ads that are going to have a lot of information. They might have a lot of copy. They're going to be educating the consumer on a new product. It's going to be a very different type of ad than if you were running an outdoor board on the side of a freeway that is only going to be able to say something like "in and out, exit Manchester." Right? That's the extent of your copy and your message to the consumer. A print ad is going to have a lot more information that it can convey, and so you would use a print ad when you have a lot of information that you want to convey to the consumer. So check out the handouts that accompany this week's lecture. You're going to have some handouts related to broadcast media buying, explaining some of the metrics, and also some other handouts explaining the metrics for print media buying. I mentioned that broadcast was purchased on rating points. Print is bought on what is called CPM, or a cost per thousand basis. Going back to our cost per ounce analysis from the initial broadcast media buying overview lecture, cost per thousand is saying for every 1,000 people who see this ad, how expensive is this print media choice versus this media choice over here. And you can compare them on a cost per thousand basis. Okay? And obviously certain things like positioning in the ad. Do you want to be on the inside cover? Do you want to be on the back cover? Those are premium positioning slots. They're more expensive than if you were just inside the magazine willy-nilly. A right page read is more expensive than a left page read because people read left to right. And you can see some more of this information in the lecture slides about print media buying. Okay, so check out that handout, and that's a quick overview on print media buying. Thank you.